I'm Tim, the Brand Weaver, and this is Branding for Breweries, the podcast that helps you grow your brewery, build a better brand, and connect with more drinkers. Each week, I'm joined by the brightest minds in the beer world, sharing practical tips to help your brewery stand out and sell more beer. Let's get stuck in. What up, 24-hour party people? 'Tis I, Tim the Brand Weaver. And if you don't know by now, what have you been doing? You are listening to Branding for Breweries, the show that brings you the brightest minds from around the beer world to your earballs, to your eyeballs, and any other senses you wish to use to help your brewery thrive, survive. No, switch that, reverse it, survive, thrive, do amazing things, sell phenomenal amounts of beer, and just be as awesome as you possibly can. And today is no exception, as I'm joined by the incredibly talented, incredibly knowledgeable Andrew Greaves. Now, Andrew is the co-founder of the Beer Necessities Taproom, or as we've recently had the conversation, European-style beer cafe. But let's just go for Taproom because it's much easier to remember. And Andrew reached out to me because he wanted to have a chat on the podcast, and his topic was kind of interesting and something we've not covered before. And this is the white labeling opportunity for breweries. Now, I'm not going to go into too much about it just with my dulcet tones. Let's bring Andrew into the chat. Let's find out what he's chatting about and have a good old chinwag. Andrew, hello, mate.
How are we? Are we well?
I am super funky fresh, sir. And yourself?
Good, man. Yeah, very good, very good. Settling into Monday, settling into a new week, nice and enjoyably with this chat we're going to have, I think, as well.
Exactly. What better way to start the Monday than a conversation with your good friend Tim about white labeling?
Correct. Wouldn't want it any other way, mate.
Hey, smashing. So, Andrew, tell us a little bit about yourself, about the Beer Necessities, before we get stuck into this really interesting conversation.
Yeah, so the Beer Necessities is kind of, we've been open since September 2024. So it's myself and my business partner, Damien Ratcliffe. We've known each other for probably nigh on 20 years. Typical conversation over a pint of, I remember what it was. We were drinking Seven Brothers Honeycomb on cask. At Casked in Rottenstow near us. We're both from Burnley. And we had this idea of setting up a bottle shop. And I think that was about 2020, almost certainly it was 2020 or either 2021 maybe. Long story short, we never wanted to own a bar or a European style beer cafe or a tap room. We just wanted a little bottle shop where we could indulge our passion for good beer. Fast forward September 2024, we open a bar. We do have a bit of a bottle shop. It's a fridge, loads of great beers. So we kind of stumbled into it, which I think gives us a bit of a unique position in that we can just feign ignorance whenever we ask silly questions like the questions we're going to be addressing today. When we ask these questions, we were just amazed that breweries were like, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do it. Knowing that we have the protection of not feeling that stupid if they turn around and went, listen, guys, this is not how things work in the brewing industry. So yeah, maybe we'll get into the kind of asking silly questions and getting, good answers. But yeah, we both have other jobs. I'm a journalist by trade and have my own agency, and Damien has a building health and safety and regulations practice that he's had for many years. But we both just love great beer, love great branded beer. And yeah, I reached out because I enjoy listening and watching your lives and things like that, Tim. And you were very gracious enough to welcome me on, having had a chat with me.
Oh, stop it, you! But I'm glad you enjoyed the show. And yeah, the reason you're here, dude, because I think contextually, what we're going to talk about is a really interesting subject that can provide value to those brewery folk who are listening. But to loop back on the ignorance side of things, I am a firm believer that ignorance is a superpower. Like actually feigning that you don't know and just pushing your luck a little bit will get you very far and be like, oh, I wasn't aware of that. But at least you put the question out there. We've talked about it before. So go team ignorant. That's my opinion.
Definitely, mate. Definitely. Damien always has a saying that it's better to beg for forgiveness than permission. And that kind of is the streak that runs through a lot of things when we're asking questions and doing things we know we probably shouldn't be doing. So hopefully Calderdale's licensing department aren't listening, but there we go.
Well, I suppose the benefit as well that you guys have is you are new to the industry. So you've got outside ideas and impressions and of course your own knowledge from the likes of your jobs, but this is a fresh slate, as it were. So things like the white label piece is really well, it seemed logical to you, I suppose, right? It was the right thing to do.
Yeah, definitely.
talk to me about, in your opinion, why do you think something like the white label partnership, you don't see it that much, to be honest. I've spotted it in a couple of places, but not a massive amount.
I think there's two things really. I think one, the reason it's almost sneered at times. And when we were setting up, we were talking about like working with breweries and kind of having our own branded pale ale or our own branded lager or whatever it might be. And we talked to a couple of the breweries who we've had relationships with since we opened, and they were happy with it. And I think it's sneered at because quite often there's not necessarily the design element. There's a new place where I live in Burnley that's opened. It's a darts room, basically. It's a darts room with a bar. And they have a lager on. And I don't know who the lager is. I've not asked who the lager is. It's drinkable. I'm guessing it's a big brand. I'm guessing it's a Madri or a Cause that, they've basically done something on clip art and branded it up as their own lager. So I think there's the two things is the branding is never that good. I think, you kind of left to your own devices. You don't necessarily employ an artist. You perhaps think you're quite good on Canva because you've watched a couple of YouTube videos. Listen, this is us. This is exactly what we were before we started doing it. I'm not criticizing that. And often the product you're looking at is you're not necessarily going to brilliant breweries, right? You're kind of looking and you're going, will they allow me to badge up? Will the wholesale distributor allow me to badge up, even if it's on the quiet, a lager, a cooking lager, whatever it is? We can sell it for $3.50 a pint, house lager, blah, blah, blah. So I think the thing you've got to get right with it is two things. You choose the brewer and having a relationship with the brewer to be able to make it work. And this is my kind of plea to breweries who may be listening is there's lots of people out there who would love to have a permanent line with a brilliant beer of yours and not, denigrate the brand. And it's about making sure that it looks good and people don't see it as, well, that's the house lager, or, the same way as we sometimes look at house wine. I mean, you may be a bit like me, Tim, if I'm going out and I see the wine menu, not the house, not the cheapest, but maybe the second cheapest wine is what I go for. Because at that point, you get into that quality level of, drinkability level. I think sometimes because the white label beer is, $3.50 a pint, and again, I'm not being snobby or anything like that, people kind of, they get it and they drink it and they just kind of go, I'm not quite sure what it is. You know what I mean? There's nothing I can hang my hat on because often, it's the name of the brewery isn't on there. So I think that's probably why it's underused, because there's not that synergy between the bar and the brewery. There's not that connection. There's not that, almost farm to fork provenance of what are we using for the white label and building that relationship, I guess.
Yeah, because I'm starting thinking about from a brewery perspective, like especially a smaller independent, there's a real trade-off with a white label. Like one, wicked, we've secured a permanent residency, we're on a tap. The downside is no bugger knows it's us for the most part, or that would be their worry. I mean, for yourselves, you actually promote quite heavily who you partner with.
Yeah.
But maybe this is a good time to talk about who you partnered with and how you've kind of developed that strong trust and partnership between yourselves and the breweries that you work with.
Yeah, so our kind of white label beer, so our Bears Gone Roosting, which is the session gluten-free IPA. So, we knew we wanted to have a kind of gluten-free house pale. We work with Roosters, like I say, and our relationship with Roosters came about because both myself and Ian Fozzard, who's the owner of Roosters, are both Burnley fans, and he reached out on a Burnley FC forum. I was plugging the bar, and he reached out and said, "Oh, I run Roosters. Do you fancy stocking some of our beers?" And we've always really loved Rooster beers, and Rooster were kind of high on our list of brands to kind of reach out to and get a relationship with. We then fostered that relationship with Phil, who's our rep, covering kind of Yorkshire, Phil Riddle. And it was actually at the trade day last year, so last kind of February, March time-ish, when we started seriously talking about kind of could we rebadge a Rooster beer, because we knew kind of brewing our own, given brewing schedules and minimum quantities needed, etc., would probably be kind of beyond us, certainly at that stage. And they were just so receptive. They were so receptive, and they know. We said to them, look, we will come to you with a design idea, and you have final sign off on the design. We worked with an artist who is a regular in our place called Gordon Armstrong, Mr. Gordo, as he's known. He's just been doing the Christmas merchandise, Christmas cards, wrapping paper for the band Sparks. He did all the album artwork for the Lemonheads last year in Evan Dando. He's worked for the Cribs, Leeds United. He's done stuff for a multitude of big brands. And we had a real I had a design concept in mind of turning our bear into a rooster in the kind of style of the penguin out of Wallace and Gromit. It's all a bit naff, so he's wearing kind of a beak with elastic. You can see the elastic. There's not much of an illusion to it, you know what I mean? And we came up with this concept, and Rooster liked it, and Rooster said, yeah, that looks fantastic. It looks like it's a Rooster beer. It's the beer necessities. There was that kind of brand cut through that, their logo was the same as it is on all of their products, etc. And from there, really, it kind of, has become a real, the partnership's just got stronger and stronger. We did a deal with them where they put in some new lines for us and a front font. It's a dummy font, but it means that we can show off the two permanent roosters that we have on. In essence, now, because we've got the relationship, we usually always have a third Rooster beer on keg, because we've got 16 keg lines. We often have a Rooster cask as well on one of his 4 cask lines. It's not permanent, but it's, I'd say, kind of, over the course of a month, there's going to be 2 or 3 Rooster, because they're always, doing monthly specials. So it's kind of gone from us wanting our own beer to really cementing just a ridiculous partnership that I hope, and certainly discussions we have, works for both us, because we've got the credibility of being on board with a fantastic brewery, but also for the brewery as well, because they've got that long-term commitment from us to take 2 lines from them, to promote them in the way we do. And we're really proud that it's not just a beer necessities white label. It's not just beer necessities pale ale. We thought about the concept. We wanted the brand to be front and center of it. And that's what we've done, really.
Yeah, see, that's an interesting one. Like you said, I didn't contemplate the commercial viability beyond having a white labeled beer on tap or on cask. Like you say, you actually then still have some of the Rooster stuff in there branded as Rooster. But what I suppose you've done is you've developed that really solid relationship where it's logical. It's like, oh, well, of course we've got your stuff here. What else have you got going on? And so there's still that scope for the brand recognition alongside the white label stuff. And does that give you even more, are you more excited to champion the other Rooster stuff because of the partnership you developed with it? Just a little bit more pushing of the Rooster than other brands potentially?
I think the one thing that I think the short answer, yes. I think the one thing that we are always really happy to push, and we've got a great partnership with Tiny Rebel. So one of our cask lines is a Tiny Rebel line. And again, that comes through building relationships, because Boise, the rep, is again a regular in our place, and he never pushed anything. He basically said, look, I'm Tiny Rebel. If you want some stuff, let me know. We did a deal with them. We have 2 permanent Seven Brothers lines, and we push the Seven Brothers stuff, because again, I think Seven Brothers is a bit of a rarity. Certainly the 2 that we have, Juicy and Honeycomb on keg. So it's not necessarily that we push Rooster, but I think all of these brands have an awareness that the branding makes it a really easy job for us to push. You know what I mean? In terms of the Rooster cans just look fabulous. The Assassin range that David Bailey's done, they look brilliant in our fridge. The hazy faced Assassin looks fabulous on the front font when it's lit up through the fisheye kind of keg badge. The Seven Brothers stuff as that recognizable brand in the Tiny Rebel. So absolutely, we push all the brands that we have permanent lines with, and we have regulars who fall into the different camps, and we have people who come into us because they know we've always got 2 Seven Brothers on permanently. We've got people who come in because they know we're a bit of a Rooster bar, because they know there's always going to be some good Rooster stuff on. So yeah, I think short answer, yes, we definitely do push. We do push Rooster, because we feel as invested in their success as they feel in our success, which is quite a nice position to be in. but we just love good branding. You know, we just love beer that looks good. We love beer that, you know, people get excited when they see a pump clip because it's a branding or it's kind of something kooky. And it's, you know, there's been a real shift in beer branding, which you'll know more than I do. Over the last, I remember kind of, you know, 20 years ago going in my favorite pub in Burnley, the Bridge Beer House, and kind of almost amateur looking brewery clips that are laminated. And that's, you know, because that's all the breweries could afford at that point. You know, they didn't pay designers or come up with brand strategies and things. So I think, you know, we're just lucky that a lot of the beers that we stock kind of fit our ethos and fit the way we want to portray what we do, is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, certainly. And so when obviously the opportunity came about in a non-standard way, like you say, on the Burnley forum, but then did you take a minute to go, okay, this sounds exciting, let's crack on? Or did you start to think about, well, what do we want to get out of it? Because I'm interested, and probably people listening want to know the perspective of someone such as yourself going into a relationship. What did good look like to you from that relationship?
I think initially good looks like access to good beer at a good price. And then when we saw how quickly the Rooster stuff that we initially got on cask, it has to be said, came through and sold, and we kind of, you know, you're looking at certain breweries sell really well. Bristol Beer Factory, whenever we get any Bristol Beer Factory on, flies out. Colonel flies out. Lake Down, I think in Sussex, flies out. And Rooster was flying out. It still does on cask. It then became more of a conversation in terms of Phil joined Rooster. He made the effort to come over, and there's some, you know, you get some reps that you don't see or don't hear from, you know, even though you may have permanent lines with them or kind of at least a semi-permanent relationship with them. So Phil really fostered that relationship. You know, he was really kind of like, well, look, is there anything else we can do for you? We were looking then at kind of the keg range. It coincided with the David Bailey redesign of that assassin range, or at least the first of the assassins. So I think the Hazy Face was one of the first. And then it was kind of becoming, you know, the offer was, do you want to be one of the launch venues? So 20 venues across the country. Do you want to be one of the launch venues for Hazy Face? It wasn't a permanent line at that point. It was just, we were going to get the cans and a keg or two in to see how it went. And then the kind of conversation naturally turned to me trying my luck a little bit and kind of going, we always had this dream of having our own beer kind of thing. And what's the process? And that's when they were basically like, look, you know, what do you want? What beer, what kind of beer do you want? You know, what are your kind of numbers? And it all stemmed from that. Then we had the conversation about the extra lines, and they put in the extra lines, 4 extra lines for us. All they insisted on was taking 2 of them as permanents and then a X number of casks or keg over 2 years, which again we knew would be very doable. And I keep asking Phil how we're doing, and we're tracking ahead of where we need to be to satisfy them from a commercial point of view. So really the kind of relationship just evolved the more you kind of, as a normal relationship does, as more you get to know each other, you realize what you can get, you know, what you can ask of that person and what commitment that person is going to give you and this brand is going to give you. And I think sometimes it's really easy for breweries to kind of think, right, I'm in once, that means it's definitely, you know, they're definitely going to keep ordering from us. And it's, you know, and I'm not naming any breweries, but I'm kind of, you know, we deal with somewhere they're kind of, you kind of think, oh, you know what, if they'd have just pushed a little bit harder, we'd have been more receptive to what they want to do. So it can be a bit of a two-way conversation, and it certainly was with Rooster, you know, sitting down with Ian and Tom, the operations director, Ian's son, and going through Phil. I throw stupid ideas at Phil all the time. You know, I've got this dream of going foraging on the hills above Todmorden and making a forage saison, and it's never no, it's always, let's have a think about it. Let's have a look at what quantities we would do. What can we forage? All within mind of, can we go out? Can we do a bit of filming with it? Can we build a story around it? Is it something that other bars are going to want to take on? You know, a forage saison that's going to be spring-like, summer-like, etc. So I think the receptiveness of breweries, I think, is what we absolutely love working with. Seven Brothers have done it. You know, Northern Whisper do it, which is one of our other kind of permanents. They're willing to listen and not just dismiss it out of hand because they can't quite see what the commercial worth is to them.
See, there's two things I want to pick up on there. One, it comes back to what we talked about at the beginning. It's that naivety side of things of going, oh, I've always had this dream to have, you know, my own beer. Like, one, there's probably a couple of people who just wouldn't dare. They'd wait for the opportunity to be presented to them. But like you say, that narrative of going, oh, well, we're on the tap now. Our work here is done. I've seen it time and time again that this industry is just a continuation of climbing up a hill, getting to Everest, and then realizing there's another bloody hill that you've now got to climb up, because that's just the start of it. You've actually got to base camp by getting on the tap. Now you have to nurture it, like you say, be open to these ideas and really build that relationship, which happens in so many areas of the brewing world. It's phenomenal. So that was your perspective, looking for someone who was open, not overly dismissive of your random wacky ideas to begin with. But I suppose now you've gone through the process with a couple of different breweries. Are there things that you would recommend for breweries that they need to be quite insistent on from someone who is then going to actually collaborate with them? Like, what should they be asking of someone in your position to make it work for them?
I think it's one like us, like I said, because we have that naivety. Because we've always been design led, so our logo, the Beer Necessities logo, is designed by Peter O'Toole, who's worked with Adidas and Clarks and Maber and Huddersfield Town, and, you know, international renowned designer. He did his logo for me for a cycling challenge I did a few years ago, you know, a couple of £100, and we reached out to him, and again, that was a 3-year process because we weren't ready, we didn't know what we needed. So I think one of the things we've learned from Rooster is that turning up with an idea of, I've got a nice picture of my dog off Facebook, can I turn it into a pump clip and that be the kind of branded beer? That's not what they want. You know, they've held up the collaboration in the sales meetings that they've had with us as this is what a collaboration should look like. So I think there's got to be an insistence on two things. I think that it's got to be design focused, and that doesn't mean say that you have to spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds on a designer. You know, there's lots of brilliant designers looking for a first shot. I'm not saying, you know, everyone should be paid, and as a journalism tutor, I kind of, you know, shudder at the thought of brilliant journalists who I've taught trying to get a place in the industry by doing free placements. So definitely be willing to pay. You know, a couple of £100 is you know, probably a cost you can share with the brewery in terms of stock, free stock to make up for some of the design costs. So I think the brewery has to demand good design, you know, practice. I think it's got to look good. And I think as well, they really have a right to demand that they are front and center of that branding. I mean, I don't know if this is allowed, but that's the branding. I realize it's probably backwards. But we've got Roosters and Beer Necessities and the branding. We wouldn't relegate Rooster to a kind of brewed by Rooster tiny in the corner. It's the same size as the Beer Necessities. You know, we wanted it to be that, and we didn't have to be asked by Roosters to make that. That was the decision that we made, that it has to be a Roosters product, right? Because that's where the credibility for us as a bar comes. So when we talk about kind of the brand suffering, I think, like I say, the two things: design, absolutely, and then their branding to be front and center of it, because I think that has got to be key, because otherwise there's nothing in it for the breweries apart from 2 kegs a week. You know, who's to say that another bar isn't going to take 2 kegs a week and not go through the kind of process of branding and the beer not being recognizable as something for that brewery, really.
This leads me to the question, and especially when you say like the size of Roosters is the same size as the Beer Necessity on the clip, like, would you maybe label it more of a collaboration than a white label? Because maybe white label is seen as the scary word where like all identity of the brewery is removed. But should breweries be looking more for really even collaborations with tap rooms and venues?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those. I think if you're a small brewery and you've got a smaller kit and you can produce a beer, you know, we would love to be in a position where we kind of say to Roosters, and like I say, we keep knocking on the door and asking the question. At some point we will, because we'll find a gap in the schedule, and, you know, we'll find something that works. Absolutely. I think collaboration, I think, that's the way it works for both bars. I always call it a collab. It is a white label. Essentially, it's a rebadging of a Roosters brew. But I want people to kind of see it. And we know, we have the people who do our beer mats get onto us saying, people had seen your beer mats on Instagram. They do a competition for kind of best beer mats, and that they've printed over the month. Well, we didn't win it, but there we go. Somebody had reached out because they used to kind of drink Roosters beer. I think they're in America. We always keep a few beer mats. He said, can we send some of these beer mats to this guy in America? And we were like, of course you can. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's kind of, so people collect memorabilia, don't they? So this is seen as another Roosters product, and I think that's the kind of nice thing for us. It's on Untapped. You know what I mean? We get people coming in, holding the glass up to the pump clip at the front and taking a picture. It's on Untapped, and it's kind of, it pushes that Rooster brand. It pushes our brand, and we get lots of people coming in, because of the way we've approached things in a design way, I think. And there's lots of brilliant examples of bars across the country getting their design right. They're the bars that, if I was a brewery, I'd be targeting those bars, saying, look, we love this. Can we do something with you? If you've got an onboard designer, can we do something that's going to be beneficial for both parties?
And a minute ago, you talked about like kind of just shifting of 2 kegs a week. Is there really any merit in it? But have you seen, once you've put your name to it as well, are you getting more shift in it? Like, are you getting a more constant rotation through that than if it were just a Roosters beer?
I think it's difficult. I think it's overtaking a couple of our other pales that we have on kind of regular or semi-regular basis. So as an individual product, I think it's selling more. I think because the Roosters designs are so strong, I think if we were to put it as the original Rooster beer, I think we would still be in a position where we're shifting probably as much. What I think it does do is it's almost a gateway to people who've perhaps not had Rooster beer before. They kind of go, well, that's 4.3. Hazy Faced is a bit stronger. Start on the 4.3. The next part, I'm going to move to the Hazy Faced Assassin. Oh, you've got some cans in the fridge. So we often find that journey of people who've not perhaps tried Rooster for a while, or see Rooster as, the cask beers that they're kind of quite well known for as well, YPA and Yorkshire Best and Yankee, all the ones that people see on pumps and naturally gravitate towards. I think it gives people an opportunity, certainly where we are, to kind of go, oh, right, Rooster on keg. Oh, that looks interesting. It's one of their own. Boom. There's one next to it as well, because they're both on a little font at the front, lit up. So I think the visibility of where they are, and that was part of the partnership, is all of our taps are at the back. We've not quite got our menu system right in terms of our pegboard. Is very difficult to update because it really hurts your fingers. We thought it was going to be really nicely designed. It's a bugger to do. We've now got a QR code that people can scan for the menu that we keep updated. But ultimately, because Rooster are on the front bar, the front of the bar, because of this dummy kind of tap that we've got in with no taps attached, I think that has helped push the brand. And again, that was something that we worked with Roosters on, in terms of, we've got this space on the bar. We'd love to be able to get the Python into that space, but there's just not the space to get the infrastructure to be able to serve from the front bar. But I'd still love again, being a bit stupid, most bar owners would go, well, you're taking up space on your bar and it doesn't do anything. I don't care about that. Let's get it front and center. And as soon as you walk in, those two are lit up. And I think people kind of go, right, there's the big German kind of font with the Schneider on, which which is a working font. Just not enough room for them to. And I think people are a bit surprised when we then turn around to the back and start pouring for the back. But it's the initial kind of recognition of that brand going, brilliant. There's two beers on. Oh, one's their own beer, and then there's another Rooster for me to try if I like it.
I think it's such a valid point. And I've seen it happen at beer festivals, like just small, like village beer festivals, where you've got, racks and racks of casks at the back, and then maybe 2 Linden machines at the front. And which ones sell out first? It's the Linden machines, because they're the closest to you. Like, you can track it. The closer it is to the person, the quicker it's probably going to sell, because visibility is that instant recognition. So good hack there. Just make sure you're on front and center on the bar.
Yeah. And again, it's another thing you can kind of, I don't know how much one of these fonts is, 350 quid if it's not connected. That was part of the install from Rooster because they could see the benefit of, well, actually, we're going to be the first thing people see because it's the first thing on the bar. And there's 16 taps at the back, which, so you're getting a bit of a head start. And I think, again, if you're looking at your investment, if there's room on a bar, because they don't take up a lot of room, ours is kind of a chrome tower with 2 light up fish eyes. Insist that the bar has your front and center. You can squeeze it on a bar. It's not taking up. There's nothing underneath apart from the clamp. So you're not taking up space with trying to get infrastructure and beer engines and things like that under there.
Yeah, it's just a permanent billboard that gets stuck at the front of the bar at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's brilliant.
What, if you don't mind me asking, how did the conversation, or was there a conversation about pricing in terms of like how much you're going to be shifting your pints for versus what Rooster would normally charge for the same beer?
There wasn't actually. Maybe that's kind of naivety on our part and their part. I think I think if Phil had come in and kind of gone, you're not really selling that for enough, it's kind of devaluing. And it goes back to the kind of white label. He's often the cheapest product, right? So your house lager is often the cheapest product. Our pricing, I think, is pretty steady in terms of beers of around that strength and the breweries. As long as the cost is somewhere between that price and that price, it's priced roughly the same. We're not kind of sticklers for there's got to be X% profit margin. Again, naivety perhaps on our part. We know that some beer costs more than others, and again, because of the relationship we've got with Rooster, I think we get a good deal, and I know from other people who deal with Rooster, they are, they're as much a supporter of making sure bars survive because they know it's intrinsically linked with their own survival as a brewery and every brewery's survival. And I'll be honest, and I go to the Rooster tap room in Harrogate quite a bit because we go to their comedy nights quite a bit because it's quite nice to have a Thursday night away and not have to worry about things. I couldn't tell you how much this particular beer is in their tap room, but it's one of those that I never feel like I've paid too much for a pint. And I think it's probably, I bet there's maybe 50 pence difference in it, if that. Whereas some of the others that we have on, we know we're cheaper than certain people's tap rooms. That comes down to a commercial decision on our behalf to charge within the profit margin that we want to work on. So, yeah, we've never had the pricing conversation, but probably quite interesting to do a bit of a wander around a few bars and see how much the said beer is in other bars, and certainly within Harrogate where you find Rooster quite a lot.
100%. And you mentioned obviously you guys being on tap now, on Untapped with yours. Have you compared the scores to see if there's any kind of like psychological preference from yours?
I haven't actually. When I was saying that, I was thinking I'm going to do that as soon as we finish this conversation. Actually, so I'm not quite sure how many people have kind of checked in. I know Ben, our barman, whenever we have a new beer, and he kind of checks in and will add beers if they're not already on there, if we get some new stuff. So I'd be interested to see what some of our staff members have rated our version of it compared to the actual version.
Yeah, because then that almost like negates the quality of the liquid. I mean, the quality of the pour and the serve is important, but then it's more experiential, like how you felt in the venue at the time, how you were drawn to the brand. You touched on, obviously, breweries are trying to do a lot to develop long-term partnerships to shield venues from try and help and shield wherever they can from what is about to happen. But they obviously need to get something long-term out of it as well. What are the things that you think breweries should be looking for to develop that long-term relationship so they know, well, if we're going to help these guys out, it's going to come back to us, it's going to really work for us?
Yeah, I think again, there's two things, and one of them is kind of pricing, obviously, but I also think it's an awareness and a willingness to work within a relationship. So I'm a big believer in we don't go with breweries because they're the cheapest beers, right? We go with breweries because they are beers that we like, they're beers that we can trust, they're beers that we think our punters can trust. So that's number one. Is pricing is important, but it's about pricing within the boundaries of the relationship. So we without investment from Rooster, we 100% would have a long-term relationship with Rooster, right? We were lucky enough that they kind of said to us, look, if you want to do a deal, we'll put 4 taps in, you pay towards it, but obviously we'll take the brunt of it, and you have to get this amount of kegs. Now, the deal in terms of how many kegs and casks we have to buy from them is preferable to some of the other deals that we were offered. So I think being realistic, and this is the kind of within the boundaries of the relationship, right? We're a small shop that we've converted into a bar, right? We do very good volumes of all this regular stuff and things like that. And we don't have a lot of beer that sits around for a long time. That's not to say that we're going to be able to do 4 or 5 kegs a week. And I think sometimes people sign up to deals thinking it's a good deal at a time because it works in hectoliters or all of this kind of thing. And when you sit back and you kind of go, oh, wow, actually, that's quite a lot of beer that we've got to order. Whether we sell it or not, there's an expectation that the curve goes with this amount of liters over X amount of years. So I think being realistic, and I think, Rooster definitely was, we signed the Rooster deal without really considering the keg cask minimum that we need to order because we knew we were probably doing it. We knew that there was a trust with Phil and with Ian that they're not trying to kind of make it so that our business is unviable and everything's got to be Rooster and we've got to have a Rooster tap takeover every other week just to make the minimum quantities. As a result, I hope it's financially viable for them and certainly kind of, the conversations we have with them all the time, either in person or over the phone or on WhatsApp, they're always so positive about what we do. And, we're always so positive about what they do. So I think realism and price are the kind of 2 key points, really. There's some brilliant newer breweries out there where we get good deals, and it does mean that we turn to them quite a bit. Big Trip, Corley's Brew, which is a fantastic brewery in Manchester, really great. Again, brilliant branding, great branding across. Big Trip, great branding. Nightjar in Hebden Bridge. We work with breweries who I think understand us. Will every now and again surprise and delight by kind of going, we're going to knock you this off your next order, or we've got a couple of kegs coming to the end of their shelf life. There's still a month on them, but we can give them you for X amount. So you get them little bits of surprise and delight and a bit more kind of, they know the relationship with us is obviously working for them. And it's that kind of, how do we keep people on board? How do we keep people interested? And, I went out for drinks with Phil, our rep in Leeds, just after Christmas. We thought we'd just have a bit of a recce and have a look around Leeds and things. And, and he just dropped in, I've included a free keg of that just to help get you through January. It's little bits like that where we don't expect it of them, right? But also I don't then mind traveling to Harrogate on a Thursday night and paying for tickets for the comedy night, even though we keep saying you don't have to pay for tickets, we'll put you on the guest list. No, we'll pay for beer, we'll pay for food. So it's a two-way street. You're more willing to work with somebody who kind of, gives you something when you're not expecting it. And I think, a lot of the brews we deal with will, bend over backwards from making sure that they can rush you a delivery if you really need it, or, give you kind of volume discounts, even if it's over 2 orders rather than ordering all at once. So it's them kind of things, I think, that are really important, especially for us who's, small business owners, new business, lots of financial challenges kind of coming down the track as well.
And that message of surprise and delight really spans across every kind of touch point at the end of the day. Like I see it myself when you do packaging design or an unboxing experience. That's the little Easter egg that you find on the back of a bottle label or a can. It's, you want that, oh, that was nice. You want that wonderful feeling. And it definitely from a relationship side of things. And here's hoping people are listening and going, yeah, okay, maybe put some effort in and surprise and delight where possible. Andrew, one thing we talked about when you and I originally connected was this idea of like kind of the lighthouse venue idea, which I wouldn't say per se you are for Roosters, but it is quite an interesting model to help breweries gain more traction in a space that maybe they might not necessarily be in there. What's your take on that kind of approach, and what are your thoughts?
I think there's 2 things really. I think one of the things is the traditional pub model is broken, right? It absolutely, shot to shit. It's something that I'm really passionate about in terms of breaking the monopolies that pub cores have when it comes to dictating what beers should be in pubs and the pricing around those beers. Vocation did some research recently that basically the thing that stops people going to the pub more is the lack of choice. So every pub you go in, traditional pub, you've got Madry, Coors, Heineken, Carlin, Stella, Foster's, Carlsberg, whatever it might be. Right. So that's one thing. So the choice thing is a big issue. For me, the other issue is these breweries running before they can walk, right? The desire for a brewery is, let's get a tap room, let's have a nice tap room. And it's great. If you've got one connected to the brewery and it's a little room and you can kind of, a couple of pumps, a couple of Linda machines, whatever it is, brilliant. That's great. Bit of an experience at the brewery. I've seen so many breweries then kind of branch out and open a tap room in a city centre, a town centre, maybe then open a second one, maybe then even open a third one. And suddenly within 2 or 3 years, the third one's closed, the second one's closed. And there's a bit of a kind of, is that business struggling? I think within the industry, it's a bit like, oh, hang on a minute, they're shutting a couple of tap rooms. They're, are they going to be around? Do we want to get associated with that kind of thing? Now, when we first opened, we had Seven Brothers Permanent on a cask line, and we had the 2 Seven Brothers keg. They also had a venue in Halifax, the Square Chapel Arts venue that sadly since shut down, where they had a full Seven Brothers bar. So it wasn't a Seven Brothers venue, but a bit of a lighthouse venue. And I think there was the Dustin Miller, I think, in Mythenroyd, also had a couple of Seven Brothers on. So we were talking at the time of then producing perhaps a poster, again, using probably Gordo or someone like that, and some beer mats to kind of almost have the kind of Seven Brothers in Calderdale. Basically the Seven Brothers tour. You could jump on a train, jump off at Mythenroyd, jump back on the train, jump off at Halifax, come back to Tomodin. You could just drink Seven Brothers beers all day long. And they had, I would suggest they were kind of like, we were a bit of a lighthouse bar. We used to get people coming from Rochdale and Leeds and Halifax and Hebden because we had Seven Brothers on, and they were looking at it going, brilliant, I can have an afternoon on the Juicy or the Current Affairs or the Honeycomb or whatever it might be. So I think it works really well because I think if you get the economics right, you're in the business of getting brand awareness into, a place like Todmorden or Hebden or Sowerby or wherever it is, without any of the costs of finding a building, fitting out a building, running a building, paying wages to kind of have 3 or 4 of your own beers on, and then have to get other beers from the wholesalers because, again, unless I'm visiting a brewery, I kind of want a bit of choice. If I'm visiting a kind of tap room in a city or town centre, I might want to stick on that brewery, but the people I'm with might kind of go, oh, I just want a crisp lager. I just want this. And a tap room or a European style beer cafe or a micro pub or whatever. That's what I should have said we were. We're a micro pub. Yeah, of course. There we go.
Squeeze it in. On the 43rd minute, we finally established.
There we go. Micro pub. I don't know what we knew we were a micro pub. It says that in our planning document. I think it gives a really good, the investment in that micro pub might be a couple of £1,000 to put in, 4 extra taps or whatever it is, less than that, to get some bar runners, to get some T-shirts, to get some posters, to get some glassware out there. And you can become that. We serve a lot of our beers, a lot of our keg beers, pints in Rooster glasses and Seven Brothers glasses. If it deserves its own glass, Delirium Red, for instance, or Schneider or whatever, they all have their own glasses. But if we're serving a guest pale, we've not got, that brewery, because we're buying 2 kegs of them, it isn't sending us 12, 24 glasses. So we've become that kind of, everything's out of a Rooster glass or a Tiny Rebel glass or a Northern Whisper glass. Most of our cask glasses are Northern Whisper or Eagles Crag. Northern Whisper have a permanent line, Eagles Crag are semi-regular. So it's just that kind of, it's not your bar, but if you can get somebody to take 2 or 3 lines because your beer's so good, shout about it. This is where you can get our beers, 40, 60 miles away from the brewery.
Yeah, I've just been contemplating like the build up to something like that as well, because you wouldn't immediately be like, hey, let's just crack on and get 3 beers in this place randomly, 80 to 100 miles down the
Yeah,
road. But you get one in, you get one line, it goes well. A conversation builds, you start to go, would you like another one? Potentially, could you stock a few? Maybe if there's not that appetite to do the few, then the white label or collaboration conversation comes in, like yourselves have done.
yeah,
And then if that's going well, then they can invest and actually put some feet on the ground in that area, like you say, without the overheads of having their own tap room. It makes
yeah,
a lot of sense, man.
yeah. I
Nice.
think it's again, and some of that decision comes from the bar owner. I think so. Some good friends of ours, Joe and Sarah, opened a bar in Burnley called Hatters Craft Beer Bar. They're doing stuff in Burnley that's not done in Burnley. They've got Asvex Brewery on, and he constantly has one or two Asvex Brewery beers on. And for Burnley, pricing wise, they're probably there's an audience that will pay £6 a pint in Burnley, right? But it's bloody good beer, so he never has any issue selling it. He's got cans at £10, £12 for the big impy stouts and things like that. I never thought I'd see the day that people in Burnley would part with 10, 12 quid for a can. Where we are, absolutely. Getting out into cities, it's the norm.
Mm.
But what he's done is he's kind of gone, these are the breweries that I really like working with. And, Asvex, whether they realize it or not, and I'd say Joe is probably so understated, he just orders from cellar. For you. What can we do? Can we get you some glassware, get you some bar runners, become a bit of a cheerleader for us in this kind of old mill town that suddenly started getting a bit of interest in stronger beers and better beers and great quality beers. And we've got a scene in Burnley. The Bridge Beer House, Emma and Simon have been in the Bridge for 25, 26, 27 years. They were always the kind of trailblazers of foreign beer, Belgium and German beer. They have some brilliant beers on. We've got lots of people who are sponges for this kind of come to us, talk to us. I never thought I'd see Asvex in Burnley. It's kind of, it goes beyond what I would see as normal. What is normal in the beer world now? There's so many breweries competing for space on taps.
Mm.
Be a bit different, get out, have conversations. They have a lot of Vault City. They went up to Vault City, I think, made themselves known, got a little bit of surprise and delight, a bit of treatment, test these beers. You're one of the first in the country to test these new beers that aren't out yet. Build relationships. Everything we've talked about for the last 47 minutes comes back to one thing, and that's relationships. And whether breweries are forward thinking enough to go out and try and start those relationship conversations, or whether bar owners are stupid, naive, ignorant enough to go out and start trying to force relationships that you might get told it's not really what we do. Right, fine, we know now.
So this brings us to a really wonderful close on this chat, because I'm thinking a couple of breweries would be listening to this going, okay, might want to give this a go, could see this happening, but we're going to send our sales guy down there, and it's going to be, oh, here comes another brewery just trying to push their beer. Like, what do you realistically recommend for a brewery in that space who are kind of going, no, we would be open to the idea of a collaboration or white labeling? How do they introduce that idea without just getting fobbed off as just you just want to take another tap because you're trying to make sales?
I think the worst thing to do is go door to door, land in a place, go door to door and hope somebody nibbles. I think you've got to have an awareness of what the bar is about, what the owners are about, what their passion are, what's their passion? Is their passion pale ales? Is it impy stouts? Is it dark beers? Is it, sours? What do they want? So getting to know people, I think, is, again, relationship building. I think the whole kind of white label collab thing, I think is you're absolutely right. I think you said it a few minutes ago. It's that destination on the journey. So it's about kind of getting in. What can we do for you? There's so many people at the minute kind of offering beer at silly cheap prices. I worry whether it's actually sustainable for the brewery themselves, and B, I worry sometimes when you see it on in several places in the same town, And you have that kind of, right, okay, so we've perhaps not got the most forward thinking of bar owners. And again, I'm new to this, so I can get away with slagging off the general consensus around things and not have to worry too much about people putting my windows through. It needs a little bit of forward thinking, a little bit of risk taking on both sides. And I think lots of people, lots of newer people to the industry do want to be guided. We wanted to be guided. We worked with James Clay, and we were lucky that we knew what beers we wanted from James Clay. So it was an easy conversation for Andy the rep, but he guides us in terms of the fridge, right? What should a good fridge look like? I think we got it just right. I think the regular stuff, some of the stuff didn't sell as quickly as possible. We don't sell it anymore. But Augustina, Schneiderweiss, Duval, Orval, Chimay, he was like, look, this is almost your perfect German, Belgian starter kit. That's your top row in your fridge, right? Everything else cascades from there. So it's about guiding it. Don't see it as a transactional relationship. See it as, you know what, I might have to put a bit of work in here, but that transactional relationship becoming a more permanent, long-standing relationship, which is open, is risk-taking, is also having an awareness of what the brewery brand is about, but also what the bar is about. I think they're the kind of things that not enough people put in that legwork to build that relationship. There's a lot of transactional sales reps out there and lots of, in every walk, not just in breweries. And I think sometimes less is more, because if you can get a satellite or a lighthouse venue where you've got 2 permanent lines, regular cans, semi-regular cask, that's a lovely little package. You get 5 of them compared to 10 people that you're having to email every week and text every week saying, can we send you any more beer? Can we send you any more beer? We say it to reps, it's not the reps' fault. We kind of go, look, we've got 4 cask pumps. 2 of them are permanently taken up. One of them's always a dark, which means we've essentially, because you do mainly blondes and, things like that, you're on a rotation. We might only get you in every 3 months. Might be less than that if it's not sold quite as well as something else sells. And we work with good wholesalers. Pivovar and Dan at Pivovar is very good at being very forward in terms of, look, we know you love this brewery personally. We've got a couple in. Do you want anything, etc., etc.? So the people who put the groundwork in get our business because they're the people who we feel are invested in what we do as individuals and what we are as a bar. So I think the legwork, be willing to build a relationship. Don't let that relationship be one way where we're ringing you for beer or you're chasing us when we're not buying beer. Let it be a relationship that thrives and builds.
And I was just thinking, it's so easy to spot in other areas, like when you've had a copy and paste email that's, tried to land in your inbox going, well, they obviously don't care. They're just like scattergunning. They're playing the numbers games. It's the same thing that if a sales rep just knocks on your door, doesn't work out, they just go a couple of feet, couple of yards, whatever it is down the road. Having that genuine care and interest and going, yeah, really like your venue, been here, seen what you've got going on. It shows that interest. And so, Andrew, if we bring this to a close, mate, you talked about, being a bit guiding and helping people out. If people wanted to have a chat with you and kind of pick your brains and even ask their own naive questions and think that you might be able to help, buddy, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram as Andrew Greaves TBN on Instagram. Anyone can pick me out on there. I'm on LinkedIn. I've just shared our conversation before we started, so I'm sure if they search for you, they'll somehow find me and my grinning mug on there. But yeah, listen, I mean, we had a lot of help from people. We sat down with bar owners, like I mentioned, Emma and Simon from the Bridge. They were so instrumental in giving us guidance on kind of when to worry when things are quiet. Mainly don't worry when things are quiet. Don't try and work out how much you've got to make per hour to survive. Do it on months and on quarters and on years. We talk to small bar owners. We talk to breweries. Every brewery we reached out to right at the start, Northern Whisper and Seven Brothers being the 2 main ones, they were so receptive to what we were about and wanted to kind of be part of the journey and came out and kind of told us the way things worked and the way things didn't work. So I'm obviously more than happy to kind of pay that forward and anybody thinking of setting up a micro pub or a brewery wanting, how do we get into places, I'm more than happy to, mate.
Fantastic, mate. Well, then all that's left for me to do, bud, is thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, mate. Thank you, mate. Really appreciate it.
It's been wonderful. Like, such a different perspective on it. You know, obviously I don't get a huge opportunity to talk to venue owners a lot. It's normally people inside the brewery and the brew house. So thank you for your time. I hope everyone who's taken the time to listen now, or indeed in the future, really enjoys this episode. Stick around. There's going to be plenty more coming. But until next time, people, have a good one. Rock on. That's a wrap on this week's episode of Branding for Breweries. If you got something great from it, hit follow, like, and subscribe on your favorite streaming app. Or even better, leave a review, share it with your brewery pals, or get in touch, because I want to chat to you. Rock on!